The President of the United States is without question the most powerful elected official within the United States federal government. However, what is expected of the President as the single most powerful person within American government? Today, we will look at the various figurative hats the President wears during their time in the White House. Or, how does one president? P.S. President is not a verb. The president is the head of the executive branch. Therefore, they are referred to as the chief executive. If you think of the executive branch as a tribe, then the president is the chief of that tribe. As a result, the buck stops with the president when it comes to fulfilling the primary responsibility of the executive branch, which is to enforce the laws of the nation. As the chief executive, the president has many tools that help them carry out or execute the laws, but one aspect of the presidency that we want to mention here is executive orders. Executive orders are rules or commands issued by the president that have the force of laws. The best way to think of these is as diet laws. Executive orders have the same great taste as laws passed by Congress, but only a fraction of the calories. Executive orders can be used by the president to solve some of the nation's problems when Congress either can't or won't exercise the lawmaking powers to craft a solution via the lawmaking process. There are limits on executive orders, which is why if you're looking for a long-lasting solution to a problem, it's generally better for Congress to tackle the problem via the legislative or lawmaking process. However, we should already know how difficult and time-consuming it can be to guide a bill through that process that leads to a fully born law. Oftentimes, it is quicker for the president to use executive orders to address those very same problems. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your viewpoint, the president is limited in the areas in which they can issue executive orders. The bigger problem, however, is that executive orders, unlike laws, can be easily overturned when the president who issued the executive order leaves the White House and is replaced by a new president. If a new president doesn't agree with a previous executive order, they can essentially wipe them out with the stroke of their own pen. That's why, if you're looking for more permanent solutions to national problems, Congress exercising their lawmaking powers is generally a more effective, long-lasting solution. On the screen, you can see an example of an executive order issued by President Harry Truman that integrated or allowed the mixing of races in the U.S. military in 1948. Next, we turn our attentions to the chief executive's judicial power. The president has three such powers that allow the president to intervene in matters of the courts. The first of which is called a reprieve. A reprieve, when granted by the president, delays a convicted person's sentence until a higher court can hear the case and weigh in. Think of this as a delay in carrying out a sentence. Perhaps you've been found guilty of a crime and sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, you feel that some mistakes were made in the trial in which you were found guilty. In this case, one option would be for your lawyers to write to the president and request a reprieve, which would delay your reporting to prison for 30 years, while they work on presenting their case to another higher court who may rule differently depending on whether or not they agree with your lawyer's findings. Again, think of this as a postponement in carrying out a convicted person's sentence. The next power in this arena possessed by the president is a commutation. And a commutation reduces the severity of a convicted person's sentence. So, if, for example, you were sentenced to death as a result of being found guilty of a violent crime, you and your lawyers could attempt to have the president commute your sentence to life in prison. Life in prison is generally considered less harsh or severe compared to the death penalty, and hence it's a commutation. Commutations only allow the president to make a sentence less severe. They cannot, as students often ask, make a convicted person's sentence more harsh or more severe. So a president could not take a person serving a 10-year prison sentence and convert their sentence to a 30-year prison sentence. A commutation only allows the president to make a sentence less severe. Lastly, there is the golden ticket or pardon. This allows a president to essentially wipe out a convicted person's sentence and free them from any remaining punishment they may be facing. Understand that presidents don't hand these out too frequently. Quite commonly, a president will issue the majority of their pardons during the final weeks and sometimes final hours as president. So understand, this is like a get out of jail free card. However, it is also so much more, as a pardon also removes any black marks next to your name related to the crimes for which you were pardoned. When you are convicted of a felony or a serious crime, that felony conviction stays on your record for the rest of your life. As a convicted felon, even after you're released from prison, you will find yourself dealing with the consequences of your conviction for years to come. Every time you fill out a job application, you will have to indicate that you are a convicted felon. How many employers do you think are eager to hire convicted felons when there are other potential hires? Convicted felons are also barred from pursuing certain careers. They can be denied voting rights and can also be banned from owning firearms, among other restrictions. So a pardon not only frees you from punishment, but it also wipes your slate clean, absolving you of the repercussions that others with felony convictions face. The president's ability to pardon only relates to federal crimes, and the presidents receive anywhere from hundreds to thousands of petitions while in office and grant very few comparatively. Aside from the president's role as chief executive, we must also discuss their role as legislative leader, which is a confusing title considering the president is not even part of the legislative branch. However, just like the president can intervene in matters primarily left to the judicial branch or the courts, the president does have the ability to involve themselves in the legislative processes that are typically the domain of our U.S. Congress. For example, the president can, and depending on their standing with the American people, recommend laws they'd like to see Congress work on. Again, depending on how popular the president is, this can be an effective way of prodding Congress towards legislative solutions to the nation's problems. They are, of course, Congress that is, under no obligation to act on the president's suggestions. However, if the president is popular and has the will of the American people behind them, then it's a risky move by members of Congress to totally ignore the president's suggestions and solutions. One of those times during which the president will throw out a whole bunch of ideas on a wide range of topics is the president's yearly State of the Union address. This is the speech the president delivers to Congress and the American people, usually sometime in February. This event I've likened to the NBA All-Star Game and the NFL Pro Bowl, in that all the big names in politics are there, but the event itself is more political theater and pageantry as compared to anything of real substance. However, on this night, you do get a pretty good look at where the president believes our nation currently is and where he'd like to see it go in the coming year. Whether or not those words become reality or remain solely hot air depend on a number of factors. If nothing else, it is a pretty solid example of the president attempting to lead the Congress. Further contributing to the president's title as legislative leader is the president's ability to use the veto to shape laws of the nation. Not only can the veto kill a bill the president doesn't support, unless Congress has a supermajority to override the president, but the president can also use the threat of the veto to shape a bill. Because the veto is so difficult to override, because a two-thirds supermajority is hard to obtain, the president can use the threat of the veto to ensure congressional bills take a form the president approves of. This could mean include this or else I'll veto, or remove that or else I'll veto. By threatening to use the veto, the president has the ability to shape laws into versions he or she feels will benefit the nation, as well as their legacy as president. Next, we have the president's role as economic leader. And the economy, hopefully you understand at this point, whether you like it or not, is something that affects the lives and well-being of all Americans, whether you like it or not, or understand it or not. The president is the economic leader of our government. Evidence of this can be found in the fact that it's the president who creates and submits a yearly budget to Congress every year that details how he or she plans to collect, hint, taxes, the trillions of dollars needed to fund the government, and where those trillions of dollars will be spent. How much on education? How much on healthcare? How much on science and research? How much on national defense? Now, Congress does have final say because they control the purse strings of the federal government, but by virtue of being able to lay out the first draft, the president has a lot of influence on what the yearly federal budget looks like. The fourth role we must discuss is that of commander-in-chief, which is reference to the fact that the president is the head of the U.S. Armed Forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. All decisions related to the military, with one big exception, the power to declare war, which belongs to Congress, rest with the president. This does not mean you will see the president riding astride a tank, waving a 10-gallon hat above his head, leading the troops into battle, but it does mean the president has final say on all military matters. Generally, the president leaves the details up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and high-ranking military officers who lay out options and recommendations to the president, but the president has the final say and the ability to call all the shots relative to military action. For example, when Barack Obama was president, the United States, after 10 years of playing hide-and-seek with Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks, they'd finally located bin Laden in an isolated compound in Pakistan. While the government intelligence was pretty strong, they could not be 100% sure that the man they'd ID'd in this Pakistani compound was, without a doubt, Osama bin Laden. So the military laid out options for then-President Barack Obama. Number one, they said they could fly an armed drone over the compound during a time the man they believed to be Osama bin Laden routinely took a walk inside the walls of the compound in the compound garden and use a drone machine gun to eliminate the man. This, however, would be a one-shot deal. If they missed the man, he would most likely disappear, and after spending 10 years looking for him, who knows if he'd be found again. Option number two was they could use a drone to fire a bunker-busting missile at the compound, leveling everything and everyone within the compound. This was problematic for two reasons. One, there were women and children in the compound who would also be killed, and additionally, it was possible, due to the strength of the bomb, you might never find enough evidence, body parts and DNA, to conclusively state you'd got your man. Or number three, they could send a team of highly trained Navy SEALs into the compound and either capture or kill the target. Now, this was a high risk, but also high reward payoff. It was risky because you'd be sending U.S. troops into a foreign nation, Pakistan, without permission. And if any of these troops were captured, it could have led to an international incident. Additionally, by sending human beings into Pakistan on a raid, you risked American lives, as these Navy SEALs could have been injured or killed. With these three options laid out, President Obama chose the high risk, high reward option 3 with the Navy SEAL raid. And according to all accounts, it was highly successful and allowed the United States to not only eliminate the man who was in charge of a dangerous terrorist network, but it also resulted in the collection of additional information on computers and disk drives that further aided the United States' fight against Al Qaeda and other terrorist networks. Had the plan failed, however, American service been killed or injured, there would have been a lot of angry people shaking fists at then President Obama. Bottom line is the president gets to call the shots once Congress has declared war. Now, there exist some loopholes in the president's need to obtain a war declaration from Congress before using military force. What if a president sends troops into another country and, say, calls it a peacekeeping mission? A peacekeeping mission that has all the characteristics of a war but is simply not called a war. Well, this is kind of, although there are some pertinent details we're skipping, how events like the Vietnam War came to be. So, in 1973, Congress overrode a presidential veto and passed the War Powers Act, which requires troops sent abroad by the president to be recalled after 60 days, unless Congress gives authority for continued military action. There is an addendum that allows for extension of those 60 days if pulling out the troops would put them in harm's way. After that, they've got to be removed, or else the president would be in violation of the law and could face consequences. Also understand that playing military hokey pokey is not an option for the president either. You can't put the troops in and pull the troops out, put the troops in and shake them all about. In launching a military operation or pulling troops out, you are looking at weeks and months of preparation. Therefore, that approach is not a manner in which the president can skirt the War Powers Act. Then we have the foreign policy leader. And foreign policy is our plan for dealing with other nations. Are we friendly or are we foes? Do we sell you advanced military technology? Do we provide you financial aid? Or do we discourage others around the world from having anything to do with you? Well, that's foreign policy. We've gone from being a country in our infancy that started out as an isolationist nation, meaning we didn't get involved in any other world problems, and probably wise as we were the skinny kid on the playground trying to hide over by the tetherball pole, to today being considered interventionists, meaning that if U.S. interests or safety are threatened anywhere around the globe, we may choose to intervene. Understand, there are many stops in between these concepts of isolationism and interventionism. And as different presidents enter the White House and world events continue to unfold, we'll continue to see an evolution in our foreign policy, but the president sets the tone. In an attempt to carry out U.S. foreign policy, the president will meet with foreign leaders. They also appoint various people who serve as ambassadors and diplomats who live in foreign countries and seek to carry out the president's goals in foreign policy within those countries. Somewhat related to foreign policy is the idea of diplomacy, and the president is the nation's chief diplomat. Diplomacy is the art of dealing with other countries. How do you get other countries to do the things you want them to do? Do you use the carrot or the stick? Do you promise hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. financial aid in exchange for a promise to use another country's airbase in an unfriendly corner of the world? Or do you threaten to bomb a foreign country back to the Stone Age should they not comply with your wishes? That's diplomacy. As you can see before you, it's the art of letting someone have your way. Lastly, we have a generic category, other, which includes roles like party leader and head of state. Party leader is the idea that since a party helped get the president into office with their hundreds of millions of dollars of support and network of campaign workers, the president has an obligation to give back to the party. Usually, this is accomplished by the president hosting fundraising dinners in the name of the party or crisscrossing the country in election season, supporting other candidates within the party. This, of course, has something to do with how popular the president is, but the idea is, as the highest elected official in the land, the president is expected to give back to the party that helped him or her and help it raise money and elect other party members into other offices in American government and keep the party hitting on all cylinders and in the forefront of the American voters' minds. And then we have the idea of head of state, which refers to the president as the symbol of the American people. Whether you like the president or not, other people within our country and around the world look at him or her as a symbolic representation of the American people. That's why during the holiday season, the president will light the national Christmas tree, they'll pardon a turkey during Thanksgiving, they'll throw out the first pitch at the first baseball game of the season. All these events and many more are part of the American experience, and as head of state, the president serves as a living symbol of America to all Americans and all those around the world. Watch out for Reagan.